In 2003, the government announced Building Schools for the Future. Its plans to spend £45 billion over the next 10 to 15 years to rebuild our ageing stock of school buildings. Between May 2006 and July 2007, the 11 politicians who comprise the Education and Skills Select Committee scrutinised how well this massive sum of money is being spent.
We're going to do it the way we want to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. You walk into this room, there's a horseshoe of MPs, and then they fire questions at you.
What I'm hearing from you is that you've got stupid clients.
They've now produced their report, which recommends that schools should be allowed more time to get the design of their new buildings right, that the environmental standards that govern school buildings need a serious overhaul, and that there's no point in building an environmentally sustainable school if the classrooms aren't good places to teach.
We have these wonderful windows, but we can't get them open to actually get sufficient ventilation without putting the children at risk.
But just how did they end up reaching these conclusions? For the first time on British television, we've gone behind the scenes of this powerful and influential body to find out how it operates and to get a sense of the messages they've been hearing about BSF.
Okay, if it's not about bright new shiny buildings, what is it about?
This unique insight will take us into evidence sessions with some of the country's leading experts on school design and construction.
Where do we stop this sort of pandering to young people?
And we'll travel with the committee as they investigate some of the most recently built schools. Our exclusive access will reveal the committee's thoughts at every stage of their journey as they struggle to come to conclusions on how well the Building Schools for the Future programme is doing. The chair of the committee is MP Barry Shearman. He's been a Member of Parliament for 28 years and chaired the Education Select Committee since 1999.
It's a unique British institution, the Select Committee, and I so often get frustrated because people underrate it. The whole essence of a Select Committee is to listen to what people are saying, get the resonance right and draw it all together. And if you do that, you write a really good report and you make a difference, really make a difference.
This huge amount of money probably isn't going to be spent on building schools again in our or our children's lifetime. The government wants to make sure that the schools they are building are going to stand the test of time. The focus of the Select Committee's report is to find out what makes a school sustainable. Barry's team of committee members come from all the main parties with differing political viewpoints.
The Sustainable Development Commission have said, the government's not thought it through, and this is very worrying, you say. It's more than worrying, it's a disaster, isn't it?
When you go on a select committee, you're supposed to forget that you're a Liberal Democrat or Labour or Conservative, and they're supposed to do it in a non-party way. Now, that doesn't always happen, inevitably.
Why are we national politicians discussing building materials in local schools? Why do we have a national commission on this? Food for thought.
When you work on a committee, there's a bit of give and a bit of take. But I will be arguing my case fiercely.
What are the processes that are going in to building schools for the future? I don't think there's only one thing that you do in an inquiry. A bit like an impressionist painting, you get little splashes of colour here and there, and gradually it builds up the picture, and that's obviously the picture that you then take forward to a report with its recommendations to government as to perhaps how they should proceed.
Before the inquiry officially began, the committee sifted through hundreds of pieces of written evidence from experts and teachers from across the country.
The government said that it wants to build schools that are truly fit for the future. Well, you've got a chance to influence the way in which they go about it.
A campaign was launched by Teachers TV to encourage the education community to have their say.
Everybody thinks about the building, but they don't think about those final little details.
I'd like them to be clean and dust-free, however that can happen.
Along with the input from school staff, the Select Committee accept evidence from any member of the public or organisation in the country.
Anyone can put in evidence about anything. Most of the evidence we receive is thought through carefully by people who happen to have an insight or have done a piece of research that actually can help us to produce a better report. And that's what we're looking for.
Okay. There you go.
Wonderful.
As part of the investigation, the committee have decided to examine some of the most recently built schools. For their first visit, they are at City of London Academy in Southwark.
Gentlemen, how are we?
Barry, how are you?
How are you? What are you doing in this obscure part of London?
The Academy, opened the previous year, was designed with an atrium in the centre to bring daylight and ventilation directly to the heart of the school.
It's slightly like a hotel design. You know, some of these hotels are built right at a foyer and the rooms running around. A bit hotelish as you come in, isn't it? You know, with the rooms running ahead. Let's go upstairs. I tell you what, I always a guarantee, if the architect is wearing a tie, I'll put mine on. Architects never wear ties.
They're all so precious anyway, aren't
they? They are, absolutely, all designers.
As designers, we bring a lot of dimensions to a project which many school clients don't necessarily recognise. They see us perhaps potentially as designers and builders who can just come along and take a brief and put the whole thing together. But we actually get under the skin of a project, and when we engage...
Of course, it's sometimes hard to know which visionary bit do you jump on, because what somebody says today is going to be the answer in 20 years' time might actually be a little backwater in history that nobody actually follows through. I mean, we had open plan classrooms in the 60s and 70s in junior schools that were then condemned in the 70s and 80s, and now we've got people saying they should all be open plan again. So you have to watch out that you don't lock all your money into something that's a passing fad.
Right. Yes. I didn't think you would have these facilities. I think just experience shows you that you've got to dig beneath the surface all the time to get a holistic view. Otherwise, you'd spend your life, just asking the senior civil servant or the head, and you'd get an interesting view, but I think a superficial view.
So I want you to be honest with us, and I want you to tell us about how you perceive the school, really.
Last week we won an award for the London Schools Environment Award. Out of all the secondary schools in London, we came top for recycling and environmental facilities.
At the moment, the schools spend like over £100,000 a year on electricity and things like that. Yeah. And if we spent that money on solar panels and that, we will, and that it is a long-term thing. But the school's going to be here for a long time, and we'll be helping the environment. So
that was very refreshing.
Yeah, it's good. They're very erudite, aren't they?
They're very erudite, yeah. So that was a good learning process for the committee and for the students. You do have to make those decisions. Do we want another £2.5 million on the cost for solar, which takes a very long time to pay back, or should you concentrate on the basics, as the environmental engineer was saying? They designed the throughputs of the currents of air and all that to get that right in the structure, rather than things that you can add on later if and when energy costs change. So we learned a lot. But early days, we're not dangerous yet. We get dangerous when we've been to, 3 months of this.
Barely 2 months into the inquiry, and CABE, the government's think tank on architecture, publish a damning report stating that nearly half of the new schools being built in the country are falling way below standard. The committee call in CABE representative Richard Simmons and Ty Goddard from the British Council for School Environments.
These are not name and shame type photographs, although we can...
Well, isn't it about time we started naming and shaming some of the people building some of this awful stuff?
We're trying to... What we're trying to do is give examples of good practice, but we also have to look at what hasn't worked.
Well, this committee gets around a bit.
It's forensic, and it's exciting. It's really, if you know that you've teased out some information that they didn't really want to give you, but in the circumstances did, that can really add value.
Next up in the witness box is John Sorrell, founder of the Sorrell Foundation, which champions the involvement of children in school design. Conservative MP Robert Wilson is keen to cross-examine him.
What children think is the thing to do today, in 10, 20 years' time may be completely different. How will these schools stand the test of time?
Well, they're not designing it. What they are, as part of the client stakeholder group, and on the Building Schools the Future programme, There are lots of people on the client side.
But you're saying they're influential in the decisions.
They
in
should
that
be.
design.
I'm not saying they are at the moment, and that's one of the things I'm asking for, because they aren't at the moment.
It was a very interesting experience. There were also some very strange questions, such as why do we need to bother to design decent schools for children? Why can't we just put them in sheds, which I thought was completely extraordinary.
Where do we stop this sort of pandering to young people in schools? Where do we draw the line? Do we start offering them manicures when they ask for them?
What the thought, isn't it? I don't think so.
How far are you prepared to go?
Well, what I would...
We're looking for insight. The fantastic thing about the Select Committee process is that people can provide written evidence. You can see from the written evidence who has the most engaging insights, or the insights that might help you take this area of policy further, and then you call them in for oral interview and you see if what they're suggesting in written evidence stands up.
As the new term begins, Barry is on his way up to his home constituency of Huddersfield to see a newly built school. As the local MP, Barry has been called in to Mould Green School, which was completed during the summer break.
This is the computer suite which we have.
Yeah. Head teacher Shirley Watson is keen to point out some of the flaws in the design.
The other thing is kind of the height of your interactive whiteboards. There need to be, children are having to stand on things to operate them. We have these wonderful windows that open 360 degrees, but we can't get them open to actually get sufficient ventilation without putting the children at risk.
It was interesting, I was listening to the chairman the other day saying that when he first started on it, he thought it was all going to be about energy consumption in schools, and that he's realised it's more complex than that.
We've got photovoltaic cells that don't work.
Oh, yeah.
This is supposed to tell us how much solar energy we're generating. But of course it's not working. They're not working. Some of our children, or one of our children, decided this.
It's really irritating.
And also the
Hello everyone, how are you?
I think the key thing is that you have to have as fewer people as possible actually making the big decisions, that there has to be clear communication, and that those people are empowered to be able to make those decisions.
One of the things that we really need to make sure is that we use the skills of, for example, the property industry and the procurement industry better to support schools, because, you know, head teachers they don't know about building, and why should they? They know about teaching and learning, and that's their job, and actually we need to have a good way of making sure that we can make the most of this programme.
Back in Westminster, the committee are keen to learn about sustainability, which goes beyond simply the environment. Marcus Orlovsky is the founder member of Bryanston Square, an organisation attempting to create better learning environments.
You know, we can talk about building schools for the future, and we can talk about building a school building in which we will place 1,500 kids and 150 teachers, and we can spend a lot of money on it and go, aren't we clever? We can take photographs of it and it can look wonderful. But actually, is it going to do the purpose of helping somebody transform from being 11 years old, coming from primary school, into exiting at 16 or 18 as a contributing member of society? I don't know. And when we talk to the teaching professions, a lot of people there don't know.
I used to watch Grange Hill as a kid, and the classrooms there were almost unrecognisable to the classrooms that I see as an MP going into schools today. They've changed in so many ways for technological reasons that we couldn't have even conceived of 30 years ago. Are we really so sure that we've got it right? Are we really so sure that we know what a classroom's going to be like in 30, 40, 50 years' time? There's no way we can.
The real nub of it there is we can make a building which can pass a sustainability carbon footprint and all that stuff, but not do what we as society are looking for that whole institution to achieve. At the end of the day, you wouldn't choose to reprofile British Airways, for example, by saying, oh, we'll build a new headquarters building.
You know, there's certain phrases that lodge in your memory, and for that moment I wanted to know, okay, if it's not about bright new shiny buildings, what is it about?
As Barry and the committee continue with their efforts to come to a conclusion about exactly what makes a school sustainable, the Building Schools for the Future programme gathers pace. On top of this, on 30th of October 2006, the Stern Review into the economic effects of climate change is released. It creates ripples around the world, stating that all environmental building standards will need to be significantly raised. But with Phase 1 of the Building Schools for the Future programme already underway, new schools are being built to a previously set environmental standard called BREEAM, which the committee finds is considered to be desperately inadequate.
The problem with BREEAM is that BREEAM very good is not very good at all. That's you know, it's. I'm not having a go at the standard. It's just that people think, oh, if I'm doing BREEAM excellent, then I'm doing really well, and the reality is that you're doing really badly.
Even if you're excellent, you're doing
yes.
badly.
Yes.
So you need to expand on that.
In the right.
One of the things we've tried to get to grips with is the environmental standards that are being applied to these buildings, and that's one of the issues that I think we're probably going to be fairly critical about. How meaningful are the various categories that can be assigned to a building, where the government can say, look, all these buildings meet the BREEAM standard, therefore we've been sustainable, and the headline for that may well be true, but if you look at the detail underneath, it might not match up to it.
BREEAM as a process is a useful toolkit. I'm just saying that the datums that are set within there, compared to where we need to be sustainable, are not even. It's not even nibbling away at the edges.
Armed with this new information, the committee follow up the BREEAM evidence session with a visit to St Francis of Assisi Academy in Liverpool. The academy, built in 2005, is the first school with a specialism in environmental sustainability.
You put your hands over, you can feel the updraft. On a sunnier day, the updraft is more significant. If you look at the end window there, you can look at a good view of the solar panels. Feel free to ask questions at any stage.
It was a brownfield site, and it was a bit of a dump, frankly. So this site was then reclaimed through the building and the park.
It did flag up some concerns. Once you build on a restricted site, you are restricted in terms of the amount of play area, the amount of expansion, the amount of light you can have in a building. It did worry me, from St Francis of Assisi, that there wasn't as much light as I'd like to have seen, especially in those big areas that were sort of buried under the school, at the bottom of the school.
A little bit of light coming, outside light coming just there.
Yeah.
So what do you think so far? Is it as good as you thought?
Yeah, I mean, it's got interesting stuff. It just does feel like a very tight site.
It is a tight site, yeah.
Which I think has kind of
There's been a sense after the visits that the committee members could have been more impressed, if you like. I think they felt it's been interesting to see two examples of sustainable schools, but equally there's still a long way to go before we really kind of have schools that embody sustainability in terms of learning and environmental issues.
The quality of questions and the perception that we now have, we are getting dangerous.
After months of visits and questioning, the committee are ready for the final showdown. The last evidence session sees them cross-examining Education Ministers Jim Knight and Parmjit Dundar, determined to get the answers they need, which will enable them to write a seminal report.
Early on in the process, they were getting up to speed, understanding how Building Schools for the Future works. Certainly by the time the ministers came in, they were spot on in terms of asking very sharp questions.
What support is being given to authorities through that visioning process?
It's a more intense sort of scrutiny than any other form of scrutiny we have in Parliament. The members of the Select Committee, and the Chairman in particular, can keep coming back until they've got a satisfactory answer. So there isn't anywhere to hide, really.
Is there a process saying, here's a new build, here this is supposed to be a very high standard, are we learning from them day on day and week on week?
That's why we've set the BREEAM standard, but that's also why we're looking at whether or not we should be going further
than that standard.
Committee, it gets dangerous when it gets knowledge from all the evidence and the visits and all the rest. I reckon, given all the responsibilities that ministers have, that by the time we get through to an end of inquiry, we know more about the subject than he or she probably does.
For their final school visit, the committee attempt to get an answer to their most elusive question: what a classroom of the future might look like.
Barry has just called, he's somewhere very near.
They travel to Maidstone to visit Chris Gerry at Cornwallis School. Chris is the executive head teacher of a federation of 3 schools in which he is testing some interesting new ideas. Chris takes them to one of the schools in his federation. He's keen to show them his attempt at testing his novel new learning space.
At the moment it's a kind of testbed for a whole variety of things. It's a testbed for training teachers, it's a testbed for looking at how children react to this. It's a testbed for looking at the furnishings and how we're going to adapt that, and the lighting and everything else. We're looking at a range of different lighting solutions to create a lighting kind of scenario for kids, because that affects mood. They can schmooze around in the morning, they can own some space, there's some storage space for them, and they've got to change their footwear. The reason we're doing that is because we want them to change their personality slightly. When they come into this space, they recognise the protocols that operate here. We need our shoes back on, we go out this way. And we try and give each school a slightly separate identity. But this is remarkably cheap to build, and of course it's pretty easy to design, because you or I or anybody here could design this thing in an afternoon in terms of saying, I want music, drama and performance space there, and I want a science plaza.
Chris's ideas certainly seem to impress Barry.
If this model is as good as I think it could be, and it probably is, it should be able to, you should be able to articulate it in a model that is portable. I just think if it was in a kind of portable form, that you could say, here it is, it's on this DVD. To give you the comparison.
It's trying to work out what the key bits are, and also trying to impose a new kind of world order.
I thought it was mind-bogglingly interesting, and I want to pursue it because, and we talked about systems, we talked about the danger of always allowing one-offs, in individual schools, individual heads, head moves on, and the innovation can cease. I'm looking for, as chairman of the committee, always looking at systemic change that you can get across schools so you can learn. And there goes that's my taxi, I better go. We've now travelled a distance and we're coming very close to what we call a wrap-up seminar to say, what have we learnt and what does that mean for the kind of recommendations we're going to make to government?
15 months since the inquiry began, the committee comes together to debate the final recommendations the report will contain.
Well, the process is an interesting one. We will receive a draft report that our chairman will present to us. We'll spend one committee session, possibly 2 sessions, going through that. We'll try and improve it. We'll try and put some amendments to it, and we'll just test out a few ideas.
One criticism of select committee reports is that sometimes, because they want to get compromise, they want to have all the different parties signed up to it so it can be seen as a non-partisan report. You might water down some of your findings a bit because you're having to please people from this wing of politics or that wing.
My job is to make sure that compromise system does not water down the report so it becomes all things to all men and women. I have to make sure it's got bite, otherwise no one's going to take any notice of it.
August the 9th, 2007, and Barry delivers the final report to Parliament. Within the 71-page document, the committee recommends that more time be allowed for the design process of all new schools to enable designers to plan for the changing needs of education in the 21st century. Along with this, they demand that a truly environmentally sustainable school must go far beyond the current standards and be completely carbon neutral.
This is, in a sense, a very positive report. We say, look, there's never been such a bonanza for school building. But our job as a select committee is always to be, but, there are other things they should be doing. And what we've said is making sure that what is appropriate for the teaching and learning process and the sustainability in terms of the environmental impact, all those things could be better done with more thought, more time, more engagement, and also learning from really good practice. At the heart of our report is this big question mark about what is the nature of teaching and learning in the 21st century. There is some indication that the government is working on this, has some ideas about it, but it's not very clear. So we've asked some pretty pertinent questions of the government in this report, and we'll see if they come back with compelling answers.
We spend all this time looking at a policy issue in great depth and having great deliberations. The key point, of course, is whether the government actually takes some notice of it.
In my view, experienced ministers who are confident in their jobs look at select committee reports very carefully.
They're a good thing. It's good to have the scrutiny, and it's good to have the committee and Parliament have a fresh look at what we're doing.
It's very good material that goes in the Select Committee report, and any government that ignores them is really taking a risk, I think.
Sometimes there are just differences of view, different approaches to policy making. That's what politics is all about.
We are not a committee that does a report and then lets it gather dust. This building programme is going to go on and on and on. And I'm going to come back, and the committee is going to come back to this and monitor it on a yearly basis. So this isn't the end, this is the beginning.